Now I hand over the microphone to Stephen, who we welcome very much. I stop my screen sharing now and Stephen will jump in.
Thank you. Okay.
Just
do my screen share.
Yes, just a second. Cool.
Okay. Can you see my presentation now, hopefully?
Yes, looks good.
Perfect. So I just want to say thank you and hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Thank you to the Creative Mornings team, actually, for taking me in and letting me be here this morning. Quick introduction. So I'm Stephen. I've been working in the digital creative industry for over 10 years now. And that ranges from startups to SMEs, advertising and innovation agencies. And I'm here to talk about a topic which is mental health in the industry, and specifically stress this morning, as it's a topic that I think is very personal for each of us. And I personally think that we have a lot to gain from opening up this conversation. But just before we begin, just to make sure we're all setting off on the right path, let's begin with a quick breathing exercise. So it's going to be your choice, eyes open or eyes closed. But just together, let's just take 3 deep breaths. Yeah. So breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. One more time. Breathe in and breathe out. Now, what I love about Creative Mornings is the collection of the different minds, the different talents, and the different ambitions, the cultures, the countries, everyone that's on the call. And I think that's a perfect representation of our industry. And maybe it's actually a representation of the work environment that you are in each day. Because whenever I talk to creatives, to strategists, to designers, innovators, project managers, whatever you want to call yourself, I find we all have something in common. As an industry, we're here to encourage innovation, imagination, creativity, and we all want to push the status quo to make it a bit better. But the question is, do we really understand the impact that it's having on us as individuals, on the future talent that we're going to take in, and even ourselves as we move in to the future of this industry? So we spend a lot of our time designing better products and services and experiences for society, but are we really taking the time to look after our own mental health or physical health in that process? So it's nearly justified as part of the job, or it's how the industry works, that many of us actually are seen working at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m., early hours in the morning. And a lot of us actually use it as a badge of honor. Hey, I was up last night, I was working on da da da. But it's a story to tell. So really, I want to ask each of you just to have a think about this. What's your 3 a.m. story? So is it a time that you've been working late in the studio? You're working on a pitch maybe, you're on that deadline, you have music pumping, you're with the team, you're all united on a mission, you're just counting down the clock. Maybe it's even your preference to work at 3 a.m. rather than in a busy afternoon in the studio. The thing is that there's many of us that actually are awake at 3 a.m., but it's not out of choice. It's actually out of fear, out of anxiety, stress, or maybe even insomnia. These are stories that we rarely share with each other, and instead we hide them behind our morning coffees. So is your story one that you got 3 or 4 hours sleep last night before you get up with your kids with your family, with your dog, and then you're back to your laptop? Are you scrolling on social media or playing video games out of either addiction or avoidance of your thoughts? Or is it a story that you're lying in bed, you're awake, you're having panic attacks, you're overthinking, you're stressed, and you're stuck in a cycle of thoughts and maybe of trauma? Thing is that each of us have a story, but what is a story that you're most likely to share? What experience you're most likely to share? Is it the story of you working on your darling project, or is it the story of your stress and your anxiety? And I think this is a question that we all need to ask ourselves. Why is this so? Because it's important that we all recognize that we all have mental health. Our mind is a valuable resource that helps us to navigate life. It helps us to navigate our complexities of work-life commitments. Truthfully, some of us are better at juggling this than others, and that's perfectly fine. That's okay. But I really hope for a day that we're welcomed to talk about our mental health in open environments, in places that we can be open and vulnerable and we can be expressive. So to understand what that meant, I decided I needed to start talking and having conversations with people in the industry to understand different experiences, different perspectives, and what happens each day. So what I've actually done in the past few months is have some research with a range of creatives from different disciplines at different levels to understand what's happening, and also to kind of see, well, what can we change? So to begin this, it's important to understand the scale. Now, the truth is, the likelihood of a mental health problem in the creative industry is 3 times that of the general population. Now, there's multiple sources of research about the creative industry across Europe from different universities, different mental health charities, but they all, the majority of them, indicate that 1 in 3 of us are likely to have a mental health issue. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. Recognize what that would mean within your work environment. How many silent people are you surrounded by? And maybe that includes you. And if it does, recognize that you're not alone in this. But if we actually break this down a little bit more, the common diagnosed disorders were anxiety and depression. Now, it's widely recognized that the mind and the body are linked. But I needed to ask what that really means in practice. Now, there's mounting evidence to suggest that stress is the cause of multiple mental health problems. So as we become overworked and exhausted, the effects of stress basically impact our vital brain regions. They become unresponsive and inflexible. And this is believed to be the fundamental element of anxiety and depression. So if we can understand that stress is the underlying current, it's important to ask ourselves, well, what are we actually stressing about? So when it comes to common factors, or when it comes to stress factors, it becomes clear that stress is an individual journey, but the factors are actually quite universal. So what we can see appearing on the screen now is a mix of both work and personal life stress factors. And it becomes important to recognize that actually it's quite important for us to separate work life and work stress and life stress from each other. And they're going to directly impact each other. So how often have you felt the stress from your workload, from feelings of isolation? Maybe you have a lack of purpose, family issues, uncertainty, work-life balance, always trying to be perfect, financial concerns. I think these are things that most of us can actually really relate to. But to take this a bit further, it's important to see stress doesn't start when we wake up, and it doesn't end when we close our computers. That's not something we can just switch on or switch off. It's actually, for me personally, stress has affected my communication and affected my relationship with everyone around me. my focus levels became so limited and my irritations sometimes become very high. And it's not limited to the workplace. It can actually impact every decision, every thought, and every type of communication that I have. So sometimes I think we can be unnecessarily hard on ourselves and on those around us as we get stressed. And the thing is, a vicious cycle can develop. So the thing is, in my research, I discovered that stress is more than an emotion. Stress is actually a hardwired physical response that travels throughout your entire body. So we need to recognize that stress is actually a natural response. It's actually communication from our body. It's something that each of us will experience. And it's something that what I've learned is that it matters how we respond to it. And it's also important to remember that it's not always bad. For what many of us don't actually know is we can separate stress into multiple categories. So we have positive stress, which is often known as eustress, or we have continuous stress, which is often known as chronic stress. So the thing is, when someone asks us how we are, we'll now be able to distinguish what we mean whenever we mean when we say we're a little bit stressed. But okay, what are these in the most basic terms? Well, eustress. This is the feeling of when you're working towards a deadline or a pitch. Your brain's fully active, you have butterflies in your belly, there's a feeling of drive, of excitement, adrenaline's pumping, and your motivation's quite high. It's often actually a method that just isn't used by creatives, it's actually used by athletes, because it is the burst of stress that actually helps you to get through your challenges. It's that feeling of accomplishing something as you complete a challenge. It's knowing that you've just achieved something, push yourself. And even if it didn't go perfectly, you know you developed in some way. So for me, this presentation is actually a perfect example of eustress. It's really ironic that I was stressing out about a presentation about stress, but that's the reality. And that's what happens. But the thing is, I've learned a lot about a topic that I'm quite passionate about. And now I'm here with you talking this morning. The thing is, whenever I talk about stress to people in industry, eustress is something that naturally comes up, even if we're unaware of it. People talk about the desire and the thrive for stress and give us a feeling of accomplishment. Or knowing that the element of time pressure and stress can actually boost our performance. So if that's eustress, then what's chronic stress? Well, chronic stress is a prolonged and constant feeling of stress. And it actually can negatively affect us if it goes untreated or unsolved. So the thing is, it could be from long hours, long days. You're trying to balance work, you're trying to balance life. It could actually be from a traumatic experience. Sometimes it can lead to lack of sleep, increased irritation with friends, family, colleagues, a lack of energy, a lack of focus, a lack of motivation. It can actually infect your sexual dysfunction and create sexual dysfunction. Increased anxiety, sometimes a feeling that there's no escape from your environments, and many, many more. The thing is what's important to note here is it's individual, but the constant here is that it is from constant stress. So again, going back to the previous slide, it could be from many, many factors. So again, when I talk to people in the industry, the thing is that chronic stress is often the common definition of how people think about stress. For many people, talk about burning out more and more by the second. Or maybe it's talking about life and talking about environments of stress of which they just don't know what to do. And this can cause a lot of confusion. Okay, so what does all this actually mean in practice? This is all good in theory. So it's kind of our ideal to be in a tolerant state of mind. And it's natural for us to fall both into a relaxed state of mind and an intense state of mind. And we can do this throughout a single day as we try to maintain the balance of our complex life situations. But the danger arrives when we actually fall in and we can to a deep and we can no longer juggle our situations, or it becomes too intense. Or maybe we're not even aware of the imbalance anymore. So whenever we are pushed too hard for too long, it's common that our body will just shut down due to mental and emotional exhaustion. And this is something that's referred to as burnout. Now, burnout is a stage which unfortunately many of us reach. And yet it's, I find, to be a taboo topic within many workplace cultures. And actually many leaders just simply don't want to discuss it. Too many of us view burnout as a sign of failure or weakness. And that's something that we just don't want to admit to ourselves, never mind to other people around us. So in my case, I didn't realize I'd burnt out. I could just feel myself getting more irritated. I was getting tired. I was pushing myself harder. I had refused to stop. I refused to give in. And it wasn't until my body forced me to stop that I actually looked up the symptoms and I realized, okay, burnt out, and I actually have chronic stress. So the people I meet often describe their chronic stress moments or their burnouts. And they tell me that, well, I've burnt out before. I know the symptoms. It's never going to happen to me again. Sadly, this isn't always true. I can tell you I've burnt out twice, and I didn't learn my lesson from the first experience. So it happened again. The other side of this is that many people in the industry just don't know what burnout looks like. And that's equally as worrying to me, because we need to be aware of the signs. We need to know how our teams, our colleagues, our friends, and our family, how they're doing, and actually when to have that appropriate conversation. The thing is, I don't think it needs to be this way, because the more of us that open up about our experiences, we can become more of a collective unit that we can actually look after each other, rather than just having this culture of like just constantly working as machines. The thing is about this is that it means we have to question. We have to question our personal mind frame, and we have to question our workplace cultures, what they both mean for mental pressures, not only for ourselves, but also for those around us. So, is your mindset one of taboo? Maybe you just don't want to talk about it. Maybe you perceive it as a weakness, and maybe you just don't understand it. Or do you promote an open mind frame? Maybe you aim to have balance, both in life and in work. So does your team promote an open communication? How comfortable are you in opening up about your feelings, about your stress levels, about work and other situations? Or there are many reasons why a lot of us don't feel comfortable in sharing our story, and that is fine. But I believe that we need to develop workplace cultures that can allow those who want to open up to do so, and those that want to ask for help, that they can. So again, I go back to people I've talked to within the industry. When I hear stories about people who come from a taboo mind frame or work setting, it's often stories about a lack of communication. There's times when I felt I couldn't or wouldn't talk to someone, so instead I just call in sick. I approached the company when I was quitting already. There was no turning back. The thing is that when I talk to those that are in a more open-minded environment or have a more open-minded mind frame, they often describe positive experiences, of mentorship, of guidance, of values, and of safety. So things such as I had a manager who would check in with me and make sure I was okay, and this was really useful. Or my work-life balance actually comes from my management team. They don't want me to be stressed out. Okay, so what does all of this mean? The question really is, how do we manage stress in the workplace? And this is a question that can also be applied to many other mindsets or feelings of unease. So there are personal steps which we can take, as well as solutions that we can simply implement in our workplaces to create sustainable environments. So I have created 4 skills for individuals and companies to practice. Number 1, become aware. So it's important that we recognize the personal responsibility that we hold in managing our own mental health and our stress levels. Each of us need to be honest about our physical and our emotional well-being. It's hard to ask sometimes, but who's responsible? Simple answer, I am. I shouldn't have stayed up to 3 a.m. I should have planned my time better. Am I addicted to work? Am I happy to put my work before my family, my friends, my health? Do I need a break? Do I need to take time off and reset and recharge? The thing is, there's no right or wrong answers to those questions. They're individual. But each of us really do have to be honest and ask these questions. Questions such as, is my body communicating to me? Am I listening to it? And I learned the lesson, I wasn't listening to my body until I was forced to. Find your personal method of stress release and meditation. And more importantly, give yourself the time in order to do so. The thing is, before I lose you all, meditation doesn't need to be sitting cross-legged, listening to sounds of whales and birds. It's actually, for me, meditation is about finding your happy space. Meditation would be playing music, writing, singing, dancing, working out, running. Whatever that is for you, that is your meditation. Practice it, put it into your routine. Now, I'm guilty of, I can say I'm guilty of not always being able to do this. But if you mess up, if you forget one day for a week, whatever, tell yourself it's okay and just start again. Adopt a positive mind frame, a positive attitude. Start to view the situations as challenges that you can master rather than a threat. So personally, I find this one very difficult whenever I'm in a space of anxiety or stress. But it is important for us to recognize the power of actually changing our perspective and adopting a positive attitude. So it's hard sometimes to look beyond the long hours, the long days, the drama in the family, the pointless meetings, whatever we have. But we can actually turn these into our advantage. So how? Well, personally, I journal, take some time out, recognize what's important to you, and ask what you want to achieve. But the truth is, when you change your mind frame towards stress, you can actually change your body's response to it. Number 2, emotional leadership. So as discussed, the importance of team culture and leadership cannot be underestimated. It can be argued that we need to understand the financial cost of emotional and physical well-being on our businesses. But the thing is, there are simple steps that we can take to practice on a daily basis to impact and change our environments. So examine the communication style and the culture of the company. Become aware of how healthy the workplace environment is at each level. So is the leadership aware of the team vibe? Are they actually aware of the happiness and motivation level at each level of the organization? Is there a setting of trust? Because if the answer is no, then maybe that's the reason that people aren't telling you about their internal struggle. Create an environment where people can be listened to. And if someone's asking for help, make sure that we're working towards solutions rather than just shutting it down. Be aware of the team's mental health, including stress levels. So basically, know the signs to look out for. Don't wait until someone has burnt out or provided you with a sick note before you're taking action, especially with the junior members on your team, because most likely the junior members are burning out as they're trying to prove their worth. Importantly, be human. Talk to the team at a human level. Connect to them. Your team is one of the most important resources. Don't talk to them like board members. Talk to them in a level that we know that we're all in this together. So use reflection techniques to build some openness and trust in the team. Encourage the team to self-reflect. Set an environment where we can be honest with our thoughts. Leaders are emotionally contagious. They impact the team and the organization. So there's a saying that a calm manager can spread calmness throughout the team, whereas an anxious manager can lead to high blood pressure in the team. That leads to number 3, communicate openly. The thing is that we all need to communicate more, both as individuals and as a team. It's important to note, I can't emphasize this enough, asking for help is always a good idea. Now, in my experience, it's always been a relief whenever I share my issues, when I open the conversation up to others and we can actually work towards a solution. But this could also refer to work solutions when you're feeling out of depth, or it could be at 3 a.m. when you're having a panic attack and you're lying awake in thought. Find someone to open up to. Anyone. Just talk. Identify and communicate your boundaries. And know that there is a power in saying no. So how often do you say yes or agree to something that is beyond your capabilities or your well-being? Identify your boundaries and understand them. And when you understand them, communicate them. Understand your needs and ask what you need. Don't be afraid to say no. There's actually power in it. Take back control for yourself. And let go of the guilt of actually thinking that you have to orchestrate everything or that you have to be perfect. You don't. Be vulnerable and allow others to do the same. This is how we can remove the stigma. It's by talking about it. So the thing is, for a few years now, those that work with me will know that I've chosen to be vulnerable in the workplace. I try to be open when I talk to my colleagues, my peers, my management, my HR. When I talk about my issues, I'm not trying to hide anything, and I'm not trying to share something when it's too late. The thing is, when I started to do this, something happened which I didn't expect. I started to share my stories about stress, my burnouts, my anxiety. When I did that, people started reaching out to me. People started telling me about their experiences. And actually, naturally, my environment and my personal situation started changing for the better. The thing is that we need to accept our own vulnerability. In that, you'll find a strength, and then you'll start to inspire others. And that takes me to number 4, which is access to resources. So all the research that I've seen, and nearly everyone that I've talked to, has talked about a stronger desire for support, for mentorship, for coaching, but importantly, not only to HR. People are looking for professionals who can be neutral to the situation, that we all understand. As another perspective other than that, just off the business. And this needs to be something beyond just a tick boxing exercise. It can't just be about setting business goals. It needs to be an environment of which we can openly talk about what's natural in that moment for us. And of course, there's access to tools, resources, educational information, and calm spaces. This could range from anything from simple information, meditations, exercise, journals, whatever we may feel to be appropriate. And most companies are probably not equipped to give the support or useful help. As without an understanding of the mental health conditions, there's actually a tendency to give sympathy rather than empathy. So, okay, what do we do with all of this? Well, my key learnings from this four is that the responsibility cannot lie simply on an individual or simply on a company. Instead, we need to collectively work together to find solutions, to find what's best for our environments, for our office cultures, and for our communication styles. But what does this mean for moving forward? Well, it's fair to say that 2020 has flipped our worlds upside down in the past 9 months. Everything we've known to be normal has been questioned. The majority of us have been challenged in the most unconventional ways we couldn't have imagined. How we're working, how we communicate, how we're socializing, everything has changed. And suddenly we're balancing home life and work life in new ways. We're remote working, we're living at the same desk that we're working on all day. We have a baby on our lap, we have a partner sitting beside us. Our concentration levels have been affected. Anxiety is so high of actually what's going to happen next. The thing is, if we look into the research, it's starting to show the true impact of our experiences on our mental health. We can see that the rates of stress and anxiety are already skyrocketing. And the World Health Organization of Europe does predict that levels of loneliness, depression, substance use, and much, much more are only going to rise. So, okay, well, what do we do? Well, my question is this our opportunity to reset? So in the last 9 months, we've been able to show a more human side to each other as we work. As we're on our video calls, we're peeking into each other's kitchens, our living rooms, or studios. We're having meetings with babies on our laps, and we're talking to each other about how isolated or vulnerable we actually feel in lockdown. And what if we could actually build upon that experience? What if we could create a future in which mental health and stress levels are just part of our conversation? The truth is that I don't have all the answers, but my aim is to do exactly that. It's to open up the conversation within the industry, that we can make stress and mental health a normal topic in the industry. So I'm going to close today with a quote. Hopefully, many people will start to think of the creative industry as a collective mission rather than an individual pursuit. Thank you.